We are starting a new section in our Bible in a Year series, Minor Prophets. There's a lot of them.
No, they're not minor prophets. They're shorter, incredibly powerful prophets.
Yeah, so this isn't the B team?
No, it's not the B team. Every time I hear minor prophet, I wince.
Yeah.
No, what we call them these days, a lot of times, is the book of the 12, because there's 12 of them, and they're probably in one scroll, perhaps. But they're not minor. They're just shorter books. But the power of these things is awesome.
Yeah.
Just that Isaiah and Jeremiah are really wordy people, and
So
Habakkuk is brief.
I've been asking you each section, who wrote these? I think my new question is, do we know who wrote these?
What I think is these represent the named prophets, but the people who actually wrote them may or may not be the named prophet. We just don't know. But there's a name associated with every one of them. We don't have specific time frames for all of them. Some we're just guessing where they come out. Some are very historically oriented.
Yep.
Like Habakkuk, we know that's prior to the invasion of Babylon, but we don't just when it came. And some others, we just don't know where they're at all. There's good guesses, but the ones where it's historically located, we know that. But the message comes out to be about the same, no matter where it's applied.
You bring up a good point that we haven't mentioned, is that the Bible's not laid out in a timeline. Like they're not put in order of like when they happened.
That's right. They're arranged thematically. Malachi, we all see that as the last of it's the end of that. We do have two different canonical orderings. The Hebrew Bible ends up in 2 Chronicles, the very last book, and it's looking forward to Messiah. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Bible, ends with Malachi. They're both ancient orderings, and why the difference? We don't know. It's not that one's better than the other, but our Bibles are according to the Septuagint order, but in our Protestant Bibles, you have the books in there that are in the Hebrew Bible. So there's some other stuff in the Minor Prophets that shows up in the Septuagint, in the Roman Catholic Bible, that's not show up in the Protestant Bible. So that'll be a confusing thing for some people. And there's some crazy stuff that gets added into Daniel, Bel and the Dragon. It's a bizarre story, but read the real one. So that's something to understand. This is where there's a difference in the canon between most of the church and the Protestant church in the Hebrew Bible versus the Greek translation of the Bible.
Okay. So in this thematic section, what's our historical coverage?
It begins with Hosea. And this is where there's an ordering, because the first 3 chapters of Hosea, everybody loves, because Hosea and Gomer, she's a prostitute. God says, go marry a prostitute. And that's, and she remains unfaithful.
Yeah.
And the 3 stories of how far Hosea is willing to go to be faithful to his unfaithful wife. It's an allegory of God and Israel.
Wow.
There's no question about what it's about. That's the interpretive grid for the book of the 12 that goes from, when would it come? 800 BC, maybe not quite that far back, down to back in the land, 400 BC. The grid that controls that is Hosea and Gomer. Now the rest of it, there's a lot of stuff there, but that's the beginning of it. And it ends up with Malachi. The people are still unfaithful, and God says, I'm going to be faithful to you because I've chosen to do that. So Malachi begins with, Jacob I love, Esau I hated.
Yeah.
Well, Esau is the nation of Edom, and they're really, really bad guys. It figures that God hates them because they're really bad guys.
Yeah.
The shocking thing is, Israel is just as bad, and God loves them. Like, what in the world? That's a shocking thing. He says, I'm faithful to you, but I'm going to slap you down because you're being unfaithful. I'm going to punish you, time out, spanking, oppression. I'm going to continue to be faithful to you. That's a theme that runs all the way through there.
Okay, so what are the big points? 12 books.
There's 12 of them. And this is a place where getting some chronology helps. Hosea is pre-exile. You get ones that are in exile, and you get one like Malachi that are post-exile.
Gotcha.
So it's helpful to put a historical time frame where you can.
Yeah.
But the base thing is God's faithful to his people, but also God does not take sin lightly. In a picture that's important is the Mosaic covenant is going to fail. The goal of the Mosaic covenant is to have a beautiful people, a treasured possession, but the sin of the people refusing to, they want to do things my way versus God's way.
Yeah.
And that gets you in trouble all the way through. But God remains faithful, even in exile.
Yeah.
And post-exile, when things are just awful, God is still faithful, and he's promising the good stuff is coming. He has a future eschatological plan for his people that's going to begin in Messiah, but it's going to continue.
Yeah.
It looks like it's all going to happen when Messiah shows up, but that turns out not to be the case.
Can you talk a little bit about, because the sin of Israel, the faithfulness issue, God's, forgiveness and grace and all of that. And, we're reading these books, we're relating them also to our lives.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about what sin is? Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. The heart of sin is I do it my way versus God's way.
Okay.
And all the way through, from Eve in the garden, when she looks at the tree, and man, it looks like just all the rest of the trees, and it'll make me wise. I'll grow up and I'll be able to figure things out for myself.
Yeah.
No, God says do it this way. Well, why, God? It doesn't make any sense to me. I got a better idea, God. And that's a heart of it. A big point of sin is using my power to hurt other people instead of my power to serve other people. And that's a big thing. Faithfulness is a big deal. Faithfulness in marriage, faithfulness to my leaders, supporting and serving. Those themes all come out through there.
So because this is our last Old Testament section, let's take a little more time. And can you talk to us about Abrahamic righteousness, what it means to be faithful?
Back at the very beginning, Abraham sets a pattern that goes for the whole Bible in the first chapters of Genesis. So it begins with the creation. In the first piece of Abrahamic righteousness, chapter 12, where they're going back into Canaan and God is taking them in, Abraham is faithful to Yahweh in the land where Baal is the king. And to insult Baal, he may get you really trouble. So faithful to Yahweh, even if it gets you in trouble. That's the first theme. The second theme, chapter 15, Abraham says, where's the baby? You promised me a baby, and my wife is like, she's 75 years old. And I asked, because my wife she's now a little past 75, how many 75-year-olds have babies? And the answer is 0. And Abraham says, where's the baby?
Yeah.
And God says, I can make stars, I can make a baby. And Abraham says, okay. That's trusting Yahweh's word, even when it makes no sense.
Yeah.
The third part, chapter 18, he says, God says to Yahweh, I want you to teach the people to do, Hebrew word is sadaqah mishpat, justice, righteousness. And justice basically is relational. It's the just community is a community where all relationships are as God designed them to be. Relation with God, others, self, rest of creation are well ordered as God designed them. That's justice. Work toward that. And we use our gifts and our talents to serve that. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is Genesis 22. That is, God sees, comes, and cares. So we look for provision in Messiah. So loyal to Yahweh, trust what he says, even when it makes no sense, form communities of justice and righteousness, all relationships as God designed them to be, look for provision in Messiah. And that theme runs all through the prophetic materials.
And so that's the heart of what we're trying to live into,
Right.
live out.
And that's what Jesus is going to summarize as love God, love neighbor.
Awesome. Well, thank you.